I'm either going to make it or you're going to pull me out in an ambulance. There was no other end to that night. I didn't care. Like, that's what skateboarding is to me. The name Tony Hawk meant way more than just me as a person. And that was strange.
Tony Hawk now is a brand. It's worth over $1 billion.
How much money do you have? We contacted you guys and they're just like, no, we're good.
It's because my schedule has been...
No, it said on the email, like, Danny's not to that point yet.
No.
I'm just kidding.
No way. There's 10 minutes left. Let's see one of those 900s. You want to see me bail? Okay. Got knocked out and broke my pelvis. Dude, this could have all gone so south. You guys have got to cut me some slack. I'm getting this. Like, I'm finally figuring it out.
What's like the biggest thing you've turned down? I'm shaking.
I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, it's surreal. But yeah, I mean, you're a legend, obviously.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's wild to see you. But yeah.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we're still, I mean, Danny and I were talking about before this, like we grew up playing the games, and I think you're such a pioneer, Tony. Like, I feel like when you were coming about, there's nobody in skateboarding who was like as big as you. Like, you know, we talk about LeBron could look at Michael Jordan and Michael could look at Magic, but like in your sport, I feel like you're the first to pioneer it. How did you get started?
Well, definitely wasn't the first to pioneer it. I think there's a few elements to that. I mean, I made a name for myself in the 80s, skating and competing and being on the Bones Brigade. And then as skating kind of took a downturn in popularity, it still was, you know, it was obviously still very relevant to a big, not a big, but a culture. And as it came back around in the 90s, I was still kind of on top of my game. So I kind of crossed over generations. And I think that carried a lot of weight or just name recognition. And then my video game got released in 99. And that definitely changed everything for me in terms of people knowing my name.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, I stand on the shoulders of giants. Like there was a whole revolution of skating before I even got into it.
Totally. I mean, I know, Danny, you were like trying to get in on the like skateboarding scene. That was like a big part of your career as well, getting started.
Yeah, I used to work with like athletes, and I always noticed how skaters, it just seemed like no one helped them. And then I was like, I was doing like stretching and stuff, and then I was like, I really wanted to try that. So that's why I came out here originally. But every time I would do something, they would always talk about, they'd be like, yeah, no, Tony Hawk has a guy. He's had a guy since the 90s or something.
A guy?
That's what they said.
I most definitely did not have a guy.
Everyone would say that though, everybody. And I was like,
wow.
Damn. Yeah, it was weird. Like they would talk about how you had someone who
good or bad, but
I don't know. Well, I always thought, I was like, oh, I mean, he takes it like really serious, you know, like with his career and his body. Like I was like, and obviously, you know, you make more money than
I would say only recently is that true.
That's wild. And I'm not kidding. Like I went to so many events, and like it was usually like older people I would talk to, and they'd always talk about how like, yeah, he's been like, you know, working out and doing stuff like just to like stay healthy. They would always say that. And I was like, man, I need to find someone like that to work with. I didn't
actually lift any weights until like in the last few months.
That's crazy.
My whole life.
Me too.
Because I guess I just never thought I needed it. And I did, you know, I kept progressing my skating, and every time I'd go, like I knew how to warm up, and I knew how to, and then I knew how to sort of make it work in any physical condition. And then broke my femur last year and had a rough go of it. I didn't actually, my bone did not heal for 8 months. And then I finally had to have it reset again. But going through that and then trying to get back to the level of skating that I wanted to, I needed help. Mm-hmm. And that's when I leaned into strength and training and stretching and physical therapy. And I never did any of that before. At all. So I had a good run, like 40 years of not doing that.
Yeah. And if we could rewind, just like to talk about the start of that 40 years, because, you know, Danny and I were researching and looking up. Did you start making it really big as a teenager? Like I was reading, like as like a 16-year-old, you were starting to make six figures, like really starting to make a name for it. Yeah. Take us through those early days that you're I mean,
I'd say really big is a relative term, but
but at least like you can make a career out of it, like in those early days. Did it hit you then?
Yeah, there was a window.
Yeah,
I would say so. I started skating when I was 10, 1978, and when I really started getting into it, it took a turn from popularity, and then it kind of went underground. Like there were a few skate parks, but there were hundreds of skate parks when I first started, and when I really got into it and I started getting good, they all closed.
Why?
Insurance. and interest level. Like skating just was a fad and it kind of fell out of style. But I was only 11 or 12, so I didn't really care what was the trend. I just loved skating. And so when it started to sort of come back into the limelight, I would say Back to the Future was like the first big boost in the mid 80s. For
oh, really? Because of the flying skateboard, the hoverboard. Like you feel like that brought life.
No, because Marty McFly actually invents the skateboard, the modern skateboard.
Right.
He pulls the scooter box off.
Yeah.
And then there was some modern skating in that, and that inspired a generation of kids to start skating. Like truly, I hear that a lot.
When he takes, it was like the Mattel skateboard, and he takes the handle off, and it turns into the hoverboard.
No, before the hoverboard thing. It's okay. Before the hoverboard thing, their kids are skating and they're skating on
like 25 minutes.
He's like, no. They're skating on makeshift scooters where they have a crate on a skateboard that has metal wheels. Marty McFly comes up and he's like, give me that. He pulls the handle and the crate off of it and he uses it like a skateboard.
Yeah.
So that was that was one of the beginnings. And when that happened, I was skating really well. I was doing well in competition. And then all of a sudden, I mean, there were a few other elements too, but all of a sudden skateboarding was kind of back in the fray and people were appreciating what we did. And to skateboarding's credit, it had gone through a whole revolution of like aerial moves and McTwists and things like that. And all that stuff was happening underground. Now it was front and center and I was riding that wave. So let's put it this way. When I first turned pro, I was 14. First place for a skate competition was $100, 75 for second, 50 for third. My first royalty check was $4.85.
Not bad.
For skateboards with my name on it. Right. And then when I was 17 and I was about to graduate high school, I was making six figures and I owned a house before I graduated high school.
Wow.
That's how quickly it happened.
Wow.
And then it happened just as quickly on the downturn after that.
What was that like going from making six figures?
That sucked. That was hard. Yeah, like early 90s, it was just, there was nothing.
You work with that guy, is his name Paul?
Paul Schmidt.
Paul Schmidt, yeah.
Yeah, he's been around since then.
Yeah, I met him when I used to do the stretching stuff. His whole operation was crazy where he'd like bring people in and try. I was like, man, that's sick.
Paul used to host vert half pipe events in the early 80s, like in Florida.
Yeah. That's where I met him in Florida.
Yeah.
He reminded me of like, kind of like what you do with your video game, probably with all the, you put all the balls on yourself.
Yeah.
How many times have you done that?
I've done that 3 times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's that experience like?
The first time it was not great because they put me in this skin tight suit. They put all these balls on me and they're like, all right, do your hardest tricks. Not like we need the foundational basics. It's like
900.
Do a 900. Yeah, for real. It was like that.
What year was this, Tony, for context?
99.
99.
Like, yeah. Well, the game was released in June 99. So it was probably like the end of 98, but early 99. And then those were the early days of mocap. My board shot out. So they had like, I don't know, 30 cameras all around this ramp that I was skating. My board shot out, hit one camera. And because that moved it a little bit, it took 3 hours to reset.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then this is all full disclosure of our video game series, but when they finally got all the data that they were going to put into the game, they had already animated a lot of the tricks just from video, and the video looked better than what they got from the mocap. So they didn't use any of the mocaps that we did.
Damn.
Wow.
But it made for good like promotions of the game.
Yeah.
With me with all the stuff on.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I thought that was the coolest thing. I was like, man, I would love to do that one day.
Yeah. So that's the dirty secret, is that we didn't even use it.
Damn. What a scam.
Anything I felt. I'm killing myself out there with ping pong balls all over me.
Was there a moment that you're like when did Tony Hawk become more of a like brand? Like when did you start thinking about like the initial conversations for the game, like starting Birdhouse? Was it during that bankruptcy or that moment where you're like,
well, I started Birdhouse in 92.
Yeah.
And that was more because I thought my career as a skater was coming to an end.
Really?
Because, I was a vert skater. Skating was dying in terms of popularity or at least for a career. And so I wanted to still be in skating. So I started a skate company thinking I would be behind the scenes and I would help to curate a team and an artistic direction. And little did I know that a few years later, I would still be skating just as much and kind of back in the limelight. And then I became more of a team rider than a company owner in those years. But to answer your question, once our video game was released, the name Tony Hawk meant way more than just me as a person. And that was strange.
That's crazy.
Because people would say Tony Hawk as if they're talking about either a game or an entity or a character. And it was like, I'm right here. It's me. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then, but with that came other opportunity.
Big time. I mean, I look at Dan, I think it's fascinating, like YouTube and what you've done, like Danny starting Virginia Rocks, like starting merch to kind of like last beyond like the YouTube game. You with your video game, like Birdhouse, like, did you approach Activision? Did they approach you? Like, I mean, we grew up playing that game. What were the initial conversations of trying to turn like pro skater into a real thing?
I was working with a PC programmer, and he wanted to do a game for PCs probably, or maybe PlayStation. And he had a really crude engine of this skater that would like go in and out of pools, and it was like keyboard controlled. It was something. I mean, it wasn't the best, but it was at least something. And we went and pitched it to a bunch of different studios and console manufacturers, and no one was having it.
I always wondered that. Like, I always wondered if it could have been someone else, like Danny Way's pro skater, or like, because I heard like George Foreman Grills was like, could have been Hulk Hogan or whatever.
Yeah, I can't. Well,
and I always wondered like who lost out on all that money.
I don't think Activision was, I don't know to answer that. But when they called me, we had given up on this PC game because the guy was just discouraged and he needed to have a career. So he moved on. But because we had planted that seed at all these places, Activision, when they were doing a game, they said, we heard Tony Hawk is trying to work on a game. We should call him. That's pretty much how I know it. When I went there, as soon as I picked it up, I was like, this is it.
Wow.
This is kind of what I always hoped a video game could be that has skateboarding. And then I realized with my influence and my resources, we could make it really legitimate and authentic. And so I signed on right away.
Wow.
Sick.
Neversoft, who was the developer, they would, this is back in the days of CDs, like CDs for PlayStations. So they would burn me a CD. I had a modified PlayStation and they would FedEx it to me and then I'd play it, make all my comments. And then the next week they would send me an updated one with all my comments addressed.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing. The way that it worked, just in terms of how archaic the technology was back then.
Yeah.
But we made it work. And then once we brought on the other skaters, they had their own input as to tricks and other ideas. And it was a group effort, but we didn't have high hopes. I think that's the thing that people don't realize is when we were doing it really was the small project. And Activision was stoked to do it, but they didn't think it was going to go gangbusters. And Neversoft was a new studio. And so it was all just kind of like, go ahead, whatever, you guys. So we had a lot of leeway in terms of what they were allowing us to do, like the music, and some of the challenges, and some stuff was a little edgy for the time. And so we were stoked that they gave us that freedom. And then when the game was nearing release, they sent out copies to the publications. And as the reviews started coming in, they were like, holy shit, we have something here.
Oh shit, we paid Tony too much money.
No, I'll tell you what happened.
I want to
renegotiate this.
They called me when all that was happening, and it was about to be released, and they said, hey, we'll offer you a buyout of future royalties. Like if you want to cash in right now.
Was that the $500,000 buyout? So how did you navigate that? Like, 'cause that was a shit ton of money. Like,
yeah, it still is. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. But compared to is Tony Hawk now as a brand, we were reading up, it's worth over $1 billion as a franchise.
I mean,
IP.
I don't know how
much money do you
that, but
Danny wants to see a Wells Fargo account.
Hold the bank.
But let's just say if you look at yeah,
it was way more.
There's
multiples
a
of-
lot
wrong,
of,
though.
yeah.
there's a lot of misconception with all that, but I'm not complaining. I live an amazing life, and I get to take care of my family and travel the world. So all good. And, I'm not chasing some giant golden carrot.
Yeah.
But
how do you say no to the 500?
honestly, like when someone says, yeah, we'll give you $500,000, like no one's ever said those words in the same room as me. You know what I mean? Like that sounds like someone saying $1 billion, gazillion dollars. But I was actually doing pretty well with other things, and X Games were kind of popping, and I was doing, I don't know. I just I felt pretty stable in my finances for the first time in a long time. And so I just said, I'm going to let it ride. And that was crazy. Like it was crazy to think that I'd turn that down.
Yeah.
But
I could tell that they were already considering a sequel. And so it felt like a pretty safe bet.
Are they going to make any more?
Oh, I hope so. They did 1 and 2. That did pretty well. They did the remaster.
Underground.
Yeah. And then the studio kind of got disbanded. So, hey, I'm never say never.
Was there ever a note, Tony, that you gave the studio they didn't agree with? Or something you wanted in the game that we didn't see?
Only in the first game, because I wanted to get a loop in there. And they said, we just don't have the technology to make that work with the gravity and how it works. And then PlayStation 2 came out.
Gravity.
We did THPS 2 and there was a loop. And that was it.
I was watching that the other day. Like, I think it was you and Bam Margera and someone doing it. And like, there was like doing it with bicycles and shit too.
Oh
like,
yeah, that
throwing
was on
mattresses
Jackass.
down.
Yeah.
I was watching that the other night. That shit's crazy. I want to try that, but I think I'd probably fuck my neck up. So, looks pretty hard.
I can tell you that it's the easiest and absolutely most dangerous thing.
Yeah. You think it'd be easier on like a dirt bike?
I can't
just,
answer
like-
that. All I
feel
can
like
tell
if you
you
just
is
kept
that
it on- kept the
it's
throttle on.
just a carve.
Huh.
And if you can hold your legs in a constant carve and wait for the flat bottom to come around, that's all it takes. But so many things can go wrong
Yeah.
right at the beginning that are tragic.
You seen people get really fucked up?
Yeah. In fact, the last time I put it up, I was like, that's the last time I'm putting it up.
I'll just watch them.
Because I saw some of the world's best, most experienced ramp skaters get destroyed. And I was
Really?
like, if those guys are getting hurt, it's over.
That makes sense.
That being said, I do have a loop in storage. So if you want to make an offer, hit me up.
Yeah. It would be cool to have that.
It is a marvel of technology. It goes up real quick.
You should give that. We saw that you have your first skateboard in the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should give them the loop too.
If they have room for it.
What was that like? That's pretty cool.
That was very cool.
Yeah.
That was my brother gave it to me. It was a hand-me-down.
Yeah.
It was my first skateboard.
It was a hand-me-down to you, or you gave it to your brother?
No, to me, he taught me how to skate.
That's sick.
And then somehow, I mean, I've had so many rare skateboards. Some of my first skateboards just get stolen or lost. And I don't know how I was able to hang on to that one.
Yeah.
But it made it through. And then I got the call. And so I had to call my brother to get his permission. So he and I both flew to DC and donated it.
Yeah, that's
What when you look back at your impact on the game, Tony, what do you see as like the biggest a legacy you hope to leave with skateboarding as a sport?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, selfishly, I just want people to recognize me as a good skater, but
Check.
on the bigger scale, maybe just someone that advocated for it so that it was, I don't know how to explain it. So that it was something that kids could choose to do and were supported in doing so. I think that, that if anything that I could have given to the skate world, I hope that's part of it.
Yeah.
Is that when I chose to skate as a kid, that was the furthest thing from cool. No one encouraged it. There was no support for it. In fact, you were made fun of. I got bullied for skating in school. Like I had to hide my skateboard in the bushes at high school.
Wow.
I was pro. I was a pro skater. I would hide my skateboard in the bushes before class.
Dude, that's insane.
And then go find it because because I learned my lesson. If I carried it,
there's Tony, get him.
I did. If I carried it through school, I would get hassled.
No way.
Wow. Because I feel like now skateboarding is so cool that people will wear skateboarding and like
of course,
the culture and the clothing.
Thrasher is a huge
Tony walks so
fashion brand. So, but I mean, that's what it was like.
Yeah.
And so now, yeah, if I have anything to do with the fact that it's cool to skate, that it's as easily available and chosen as any sport.
Yeah.
And I guess if I had any legacy, it would be providing skate parks.
What did an average day look like of Tony Hawk? Are you doing more of the thing, which is like practicing skateboarding, or are you doing more on the business side, trying to get the brand, the video game, like all this stuff? Like you're becoming like an international.
That's all day by day, but I'd say that, I still try to walk the walk. I still skate as much as possible. So that's usually what I'm trying to focus on, even though it's hard for me to find windows of time. Like literally, it's hard to schedule skating.
Yeah.
But other than that, like today we recorded 2 episodes of our podcast, Hawk versus Wolf, here in LA. I went to the doctor to get my last checkup on my femur that I broke last year. So he said, "You have graduated." That was his exact quote, which means that my bone has finally healed itself. And then I went to Supreme because they have a bowl there, and I skated the bowl for about 20 minutes. And then I came here. That was my day today. Yesterday was working out, taking my daughter to school, working out, going to my ramp, shooting. I'm working on my last video part ever right now. So I went to the ramp, skated for like 2 hours, got the goods, got the clips, and then picked my daughter up from school, drove her to theater practice, which is very far away. And then came back, got her at night. And that was it. That was my day. So that's a day at home.
Yeah.
If I'm traveling, it's all over the place.
Yeah. So still
it's like
skating and part of the day to day that you go through.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
Like today, there's no skating. Well, I went to the Supreme, but I'm not on the ramp. I'm not trying tricks and whatever. But I mean, really, I went through the rough recovery on my femur. And so I'm taking every opportunity right now to go skate because it was taken away from me for so long. And I cherish it more than ever.
Yeah.
How did the femur injury happen?
Skating.
But like what specifically?
I was doing a McTwist and I didn't have enough speed for it. And that's never been a problem in my younger days. But apparently it's a problem when you're in your 50s and you don't have enough speed for McTwist and you try to make it anyway. So my legs kind of got tangled. And then I remember feeling it just disconnect as I was sliding. I was still sliding across the flat bottom. And I was like, I broke my leg. And I remember looking at my friend. He's like, "What?" And I grabbed it because it was over here. And I grabbed it and put it back in place.
Oh my God.
And he's like, "Oh yeah, he broke it."
What did you just lay there until the ambulance comes, or how did it work?
That's how it worked.
I broke my leg at the skate park when I was like a kid, and I remember I just laid there and I was like, "Oh, it fucking hurts so bad." I broke my tibia. Like,
yeah. So
it was disgusting. I like fell. I remember, and I had to just sit there and like just.
You have to disassociate too.
It was yes.
I think if I hadn't moved it, I would have been more in shock to see it because the bone was actually sticking out.
Oh, really?
Oh.
But because I moved it, that kind of, made it not so visually scary.
Yeah.
But I remember my friend, I found like a comfortable position that I could just sort of lean on and have my one leg resting on the other to wait for the ambulance. And my friend brought me 2 Advil.
What the fuck?
So I was like, that's all I had. So
when you moved it back, was the bone wasn't sticking out at all?
No, once I moved it, but what happened was I when I finally pulled my shorts up, I saw the hole where the bone had come out.
Oh, that's fucking
and
gross.
That's where the blood was coming out. So anyway, let's just say that I didn't wait long enough for the bone to heal, and I got right back on my skateboard, and I made it shift out of place, so it never actually connected. So for the first 8 months, I had 2 bones.
Whoa.
And I was just in denial. Like I was still skating and I was in pain all the time. And I just thought, well, that's what happens. You break your femur and you're just always in pain and it sucks and you can't lean forward. And then I finally got x-rays and they're like, no, this is still broken.
Oh.
And so I went and saw a specialist here, and a specialist that does non-union. It's called a non-union fracture. And so he put it in place, put a new rod in there, and he just like, don't do anything for 2 months.
That's wild.
Wow.
Do you, as you get older, is it when you wake up in the morning and just get out of bed, does it hurt really bad?
Not as much as you'd think.
Yeah. I feel it already.
My neck sucks. My neck is super
Really?
stiff all the time. Yeah.
From like hitting and stuff?
Yeah. It's whiplash. You know, when you got that KO.
Yeah. That hurt for a couple of years.
Those kind of falls just for decades.
That's what I obviously like, I've watched Jackass and Bam and Deer Deck and everything growing up. And I always just try to do like, I guess like the pussier version of them and just try to stay healthy and like not get hurt. And the biggest thing I do is like try not to hit my head. Like when I hit my head on that one day skating, it's like, dude, my neck was so tight for like 2 years. It was crazy.
That's crucial to everything.
Yeah.
So you got to save your head.
That's what I try to tell everyone too. Like, cause they think I'm like an idiot kind of, but I just like think if you don't hit your head as much, it's like, that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my helmet saved my life.
Yeah.
For sure. And so, I would prefer not to get any more concussions. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not even talking about concussions. I'm talking about like just shooting out on the flat and getting that sort of whiplash thing. We call it chicken neck.
Yeah.
You get a chicken neck and then that just happens over and over and over again. And after a while, I'm like, you know, if someone calls my name over here, I'm like, huh? What?
Yeah. Do you do anything like regularly to try to like help with your neck?
I do acupuncture and there is someone that works on it, but he's kind of told me like,
this is the best.
It's not going to, this is like, we can maintain it here, but I don't think it's going to get better.
Yeah. Do you think acupuncture helps?
I think it helps overall just in terms of resetting.
And Riley, I remember back in the day, he was skating with Baker. Is he still skating now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
I have 6 kids total, and they all skate.
Who was your first, Riley?
Riley, yeah. He's the oldest. He's 30.
What was that like when getting him into skateboarding when he first started?
I didn't really get him. He was just surrounded by it.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was more like I couldn't afford childcare so much. And so if I was going on tour, he just came.
Yeah.
And so he just picked it up because it was just like everywhere. He loves it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not like he was, he was forced into it at all, but he loves it. And I think around age 10 or 11 is when I recognized that, he's really got he's got the skills and he's got the drive. Because it's one thing to have the skills, but not the motivation. And he was always trying to get better and learn new techniques. And then at some point we were on tour. I'll never forget. Let's see, that was probably like 96-ish. Wait, sorry, my years are off. So he's about 10 years old. I took him on this UK tour that we did for Audio Shoes. And I remember the team manager for Audio, who was a pro skater himself. He was watching us all skate and he's like, that's it. Riley's better than me. Like it finally has happened. And then I was watching him. I was like, yeah, he is like right in the pocket with everyone. And he's the little kid.
Yeah.
And then at some point he started asking me how to do tricks that I didn't know how to do.
That's funny.
You know what I mean? I was like, he's like, Dad, how do you do a kickflip frontside tail slide? I was like, I'm honored you asked me that, but I don't know.
It seems like it runs in the family because when you started getting big in skateboarding, Tony, your dad also got more involved, right? And he was very instrumental in making the X Games what it is today. Is that right?
Yeah, well, not the X Games. He passed away, but he was just really supportive of his kids.
Yeah.
So my older brother was a surfer. He would drive him, at sunrise to go surf. And one of my sisters is a musician. He would carry all the band gear and help set up. And so when I was born and he saw that I loved skating, he saw that there was no organization.
Yeah.
And there were no events, and there was this group of kids that were super passionate about it. And so he helped to organize events back then, the National Skateboard Association, which kind of set the standard for competition. So in a way, yeah, he influenced X Games, but he actually, he passed away in 95. He got to see the first X Games on TV. And for my dad, who was a massive sports fan, to see skateboarding on ESPN that was the biggest thing ever. Like in his eyes, skateboarding's finally made it. It's on ESPN. I mean, he would flip out if he knew it was in the Olympics, but
yeah. Do you wish in a way the Olympics was like back then so you could have competed in that?
No, I don't have those.
That's good.
Regrets.
I asked Paul Rodriguez that the other day. He was like, no, not really. I was like, I feel like I would have been like, damn, that would have been cool.
Yeah, I guess because skateboarding was so renegade, and it was sort of the antithesis to Olympics when I was a kid.
That's true.
That it wasn't. We weren't down. You know what I mean? We weren't like now. I understand and how if you're a kid starting to skate now, that's an option to represent your country, and that's huge. But in our day, it was like, nah, we don't care about the mainstream sports. And when X Games started hitting, that was the Olympics. Yeah. As far as we were concerned. Exactly. Like that was the biggest venue. That was the biggest audience. And then there were also core skate events that meant a lot, obviously. But I don't really have any sort of wistful regret in that sense. I love seeing it now. I love how it's received. You know what I mean? Skateboarding is still renegade and irreverent. And yes, they have to conform to certain rules to be on the Olympics, but at the same time, I feel like that attitude still shines through.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
it's like you're talking about
They're
Kieran
still beating
running.
the
It's like
drug test.
Kieran ran into the cameraman at the Olympics. When does that ever happen?
Yeah,
and just got up and continued his run because it's skateboarding. You know what I mean?
What was that process like getting? Because you were also instrumental in getting skateboarding to the Olympics. What was that like? Like how do you get a sport to the Olympics?
Yeah,
that's not already part of it.
Well, that was a lot of meetings, and it was more just trying to convince this sort of archaic sports organization that look, what skateboarding is just as much of a sport that you define as a sport as anything else that you're presenting out there. You don't have a cool factor in summer. Like you got the cool factor in the Winter Olympics. Yeah. And so there were all these rules that you had to follow. There's so much protocol that in terms of what it takes to be recognized. You have to have a governing body, a national or international governing body. You have to have enough countries that have national governing organizations. There's a whole thing. Like it's really complicated. So the skateboard community got proactive in getting checking all those boxes. And then when it came around to Tokyo, they said, oh, Tokyo, Japan can add one event themselves without having to remove an event. And they chose skateboarding.
Wow.
So that's when it all happened. After that, they were trying to get me to go to all these meetings and be sort of, for the most part, a poster boy for, and that's when I was like, you guys, I did my job. You know what I mean? Like I always thought skateboarding could be an Olympic sport. I thought it would be a great thing in terms of international recognition and growth for skateboarding. And it's there. My job is done. Like I don't want to be part of the machine anymore because it's complicated and it's messy. So I kind of quietly removed myself from all that, and now I just watch like a fan.
Yeah, I mean it's so cool how you could like dip your toe in so many different areas, like the Olympics, the video game, like your own brand, like it's just, and then remove yourself and do something else and have more impact.
Yeah, I mean I do what I can to promote skateboarding in general, or to be, I don't know, I guess some people have appointed me as some sort of ambassador to skating. I'm happy to represent skateboarding, but if you're looking at me as an individual, I don't represent skateboarding. I'm a 55-year-old vert dude. You know what I mean?
I was going to say virgin. I thought you were like a 55-year-old virgin. I was like, what? I think a lot of people just...
I have 6 kids.
Right.
Got that taken care of.
I think so many people just like are intro to you through like they learn
I'm
about
happy, and I'm happy to be the
through
gateway.
you.
Like that's what I mean. I'm
that's how
happy to
it is.
advocate for all styles of skating. I appreciate that skating is still renegade and that people hop fences to go skate schoolyards and stuff like that. You know what I mean? That all is part of genuine skateboarding and core skateboarding. So I'm not trying to promote it as some sort of safe packaging.
Right.
That's like, well, it's now the Olympics, and now it's, there is support and there is training facilities. Like, yeah, sure, all that exists, but also it gets dirty over here too.
Yeah.
And I love all of it.
I was doing a bunch of research, and we saw that, I don't know what to believe on the internet, because so much is fake, but that you use the name Tony Hawk as a stage name and that your real name is Mike. Is there any truth to that?
There is not, but that is a running joke in our family.
I bet.
My brother, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. My brother's name is Steve, and unfortunately people have actually asked him if his name was Mike.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Tony, I was reading up, like you have so many like things associated with your brand. Like you have the you have like the Hawk clothing, Hawk eyewear, like you have a signature toy series. I'm wondering, is there like anything that people have approached you with to put your name on that has like really caught your eye or you didn't think would work, but ultimately did? And how do you think about?
Well,
like,
I wouldn't sign on to anything unless I believed that it would work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't just throw my name on there. Like, I don't know. Why not? So I don't know if that's a good answer for you.
Or how do you test it out? Because I mean, there's so many things that had the Tony Hawk branding on it. Like, how do you think about like, because your brand has endured so many years. Like, how did you think about what to lend your name to versus not?
If I feel like it connects to skateboarding or it's something that I genuinely believe in, that's pretty much it. And it's a gut instinct. It's more like, does this fit, or would I really be using this? I'll give you an example. I did a thing for QNOL for supplements, and they approached me and said, we're doing a campaign for some of these supplements. I'm 55, so I take their CoQ10 supplement. I really do, and their turmeric gummies. Like, I use them, and I sent them a photo of me with the bottles. Like, I'm already way ahead of you. Like, I buy these, and so I got their campaign, and it's legit.
Yeah,
that's one example, but it's all real.
What's like the biggest thing you've turned down?
Yeah.
Geez, that's tricky. I don't want to get into it, but let's just say that there have been countries that wanted me to sort of be on their tourism program, and I wasn't down.
Some oil money. So like 100 million, you think?
100 million. Wait. Where'd you hear 100 million?
Less?
Where's that? No.
What's the, I seen somewhere it was like when you're out in public and people, recognize you, but don't recognize you, but they know the name. Yeah.
I mean, now it
gets repetitive and
it's because I shared a lot of those stories online, and now people play into the joke. So
they do know usually now?
It goes both ways, and I can tell when they're joking or when it's serious.
I see.
My wife and I went somewhere the other day. We pulled up, and there was a woman sitting on a bench. Right, we pulled up, and as soon as I got out of the car, she's like, "Anyone ever tell you you look like Tony Hawk?" And I could just tell she's joking. And I was like, "Yep, but you're the first today."
That's funny.
But it's more like, I think what happened was somewhere down the line, I got old, obviously, and people they stuck me in this sort of bubble of the 90s. Or the early 2000s, when they know my face or my name or my video game, and didn't imagine that I could have gotten older in the last 20 years. Yeah. And so they see me and they're like, yeah, that face looks like him, but there's no way. Or my legal name is Anthony, not Mike. Thank you. And I've never gone by Anthony, but when they see my ID, especially at the airport, they're like, Anthony Hawk. Oh, like that Tony Hawk guy. I'm like, yep. And that's how it started, actually. I was at the airport, and the woman checked my ID, and she's like, Anthony Hawk, like Tony Hawk. I said, exactly. She's like, I wonder what he's up to these days.
I love that guy.
No, she said, I wonder what he's up to these days. And I go,
unironically.
I said this.
Yeah.
And she's like, didn't make the connection. And
I have people come up to me sometimes. They're like, has anyone ever said you look like that Danny Duncan guy? I'm like, yeah, I think it's the hair. That's what I say. In the beginning, it was like Shaun White because my hair used to be longer. They'd always say I look like Shaun White and stuff. I was like, but
it drives my daughter crazy because people will say, does anyone ever tell you look like Tony Hawk? I said, yes. And they're like, oh, okay. And then she's like, why do you tell them?
Yeah, right.
They didn't ask me.
Probably a repetitive thing. I think sometimes.
Well, they never actually think it could be me, so they don't ask.
That's funny.
And I feel pretentious, just like, well, actually.
Yeah. I know, that's why.
That's me.
Yeah. When you were like coming up and everything, was there people you were fans of that then you eventually got to meet? You know what I mean? Like maybe movie stars or whatever, athletes. What was that like? Like who was like the people, like the highest up for you back then?
Oh man, that's tricky.
Like I guess when you're like, holy shit. Like when I met Bam Margera, I was like, I don't really like, get like that. But like, when I met Bam Margera, I was like, what the fuck, dude? Like it was just weird as hell to look at him, Yeah.
I've definitely had that. More like musicians that I really enjoyed and that sort of defined eras in my life. And I was able to meet them and hang out with them.
Because it's pretty cool. Because I would assume they're probably like, oh shit, Tony Hawk at the same time in a way, right?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, they're usually pretty cordial and friendly. And also, I don't like to pull the celebrity card that much, but if it's like a concert or something, I'm definitely honing in like, hey, get backstage passes.
Once I get that card, I'm doing it all the time.
What's that?
Once I get that card, I'm going to do that all the time. One day, man.
I think it'll work for you in a lot of situations that maybe you like if there's a band that you want to see or something, I'm sure they know of you that you could probably do it.
Dude, I feel like we get zero support until I started playing pickleball. That's when I started like meeting people. So random. Huh. Yeah. I feel like my YouTube's very like underground in a way, like where I feel like the clothing though is like more mainstream than me, but it does have my name on it, which is good. But yeah, me as a person, I feel like it's very like, just like, we like contacted you guys, like your team, and they're just like, no, we're good. And then I was like, I had to hit up a limb, and I was like, yo, is there any way you could, the
only reason they said that is because my schedule in the last 2 months has been.
No, it said on the email, like Danny's not to that point yet.
No,
I'm just kidding. No way. Imagine.
Not from my office. That didn't happen. I'll take things that didn't happen for 100.
No, that did not happen.
No, and they just don't. They don't want to overwhelm me with.
Yeah, I get that.
Like even today it was just like boom, 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 boom. Like crazy. That. But I'm glad that you went through a side door.
Yeah.
Lim right here, and that we made it happen. Yeah. So it's cool. And Lim is my TikTok whisperer. So
Tony, it's been 2 decades of like you mentioned like staying relevant. How do you think about social media today? We were watching this video of a kid who wanted to ship you a board.
Oh yeah,
the FedEx guy just put out a TikTok.
Yeah,
and then within a day you responded. Like, how do you find those moments, and how do you think about?
Oh well, in a moment like that, I'm just getting tagged endlessly.
Yeah,
and people are sending me that from all different sources. So that one was pretty easy to find. Mm-hmm. I just started doing it because I enjoyed it. I mean, I was on Twitter a long time ago, like right, I don't know, the early days of it. And I started using it just for fun and hiding skateboards and doing just kind of more interactive stuff. And then when Instagram came along, I was able to use that for the same sort of stuff. And so all along, I've just been doing it for fun. And then at some point it became, there was opportunity with it. So I embraced that, but I always still try to keep it. So it's just enjoyable for people. And I think that was probably my best approach, because a lot of people immediately get on it and they want to be influencers and they want to make money from it. And it's just like, well, if you're not producing something that's enjoyable, there's no point.
Yeah.
And it also became an outlet for like old school stuff, which has really been fun. Suddenly someone will tag me in something, or someone will be like, hey man, I got a video of you guys skating in 85 at this thing. And it's like, send it over.
Yeah, that's wild.
And then put it out, and it's just like, it gets a new life.
Yeah.
And I've done a bunch of that stuff, and that always kind of blows up.
Is there a clip that you watch of your younger self that you can't believe, or you give yourself different advice if you're in that moment to handle it?
No, because it all brought me here. I definitely there's stuff that can make you cringe, obviously, from those days.
Like what? What was the
I lived through the 80s. So I mean, just outfit choices for one. And yeah, you know, my style, like I went through I went through some transitional phases of my style in terms of like, it was too, I don't know how to explain it. Like I was all about tricks.
Yeah.
And then at some point I tried to really focus in on giving them more style. And so when I look back, there's certain eras of my skating that I look more robotic. But it got me here. So it's more like, yeah, what would I say? I would say like, don't be so wildly focused on tricks because you're losing your sense of flow.
Did you tell me, I was reading up, you invented a bunch of tricks. It looks like the Madonna, the kickflip McTwist. Like, like how did you invent those tricks? And how did you go about like inventing a trick in a sport that's just...
I was just combining stuff. So those are the early days though. I mean, like those tricks, like the Madonna was invented in 85. And it was more that we were experimenting on doing one-footed tricks, so taking your foot off in the middle of the air. And then I was doing tricks where I would land on the tail, and then I just was like, take my foot off and then land on the tail. And at the time, no one had done it. And I was talking to my friend and I said, how come I'm trying to learn all these tricks and I'm trying to be creative, but no one wants to do any of these tricks that I'm making up. And they're not all impossibly hard. And he said, well, you just got to name it something trendy. And so it was 1985. The trendiest thing was Madonna. It's like,
hilarious.
You know, it's like saying Taylor Swift now.
Yeah.
And so I just said, okay, that's the Madonna. And then here we are talking about 40 years later. So I guess it worked.
Wow.
That's funny. It's funny because I would never know that.
Yeah.
Like I know that, like obviously in the game, you know, and stuff like that, like the tricks, but it's wild.
I was in the same room as Madonna a few months ago.
Yeah, did she ever? Yeah, what did she say?
And I didn't get a chance to talk to her because she was surrounded by bodyguards and all these people were trying to get photos.
That's absurd.
I just wanted to swoop in and be like, hey, I named a trick after you.
Yeah, everyone needs to tag her. Every tag her. Then she'll see it. Everyone go tag her. Yeah, right. What the one thing I loved as a kid too, this is super random, but that bit in Jackass, the sweaty fat fucks, when you guys had those.
Oh man, I almost got destroyed.
Yeah, what was it like skating and like
it was hard.
What were you guys?
Well,
like,
we were truly sweaty.
Yeah, what would you have on? Like
we had bubble wrap.
Oh, that's what it was.
Bubble wrap, and then they taped the bubble wrap to us. And then at some point, I was so stiff that I said, you guys have got to cut me some slack. Like you got to either take some off or cut some slices in so I can move my limbs because this is dangerous. Like I can't even bend my legs.
That's wild.
And so they took out a little bit so I could function, but it was hard.
I remember I would rewatch that all the time. But then there's something too where it's like, I don't know, someone falls and the board comes shooting.
Oh, that was that you? Bam. Yeah, no,
or that's Bam. Who
yeah.
Is that your board?
I think it was his because we did a trick.
And there's like is it like Coke cans or popcorn? Like what was that? I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I think we did it. We did a trick, and then he fell at the end, and his board shot out and came back at him because it was on a half pipe.
Yeah.
And it came back under his chest, but like right here.
Yeah, it was
and if he didn't have that
suspender thing.
Yeah, if he didn't have the bubble wrap on, he would have got rocked.
Yeah. I remember. You were like...
I mean, there's so many close calls with Jackass. Like, it is amazing that they got away with all that for so long.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived through a couple of them, like where it was just like, dude, this could have all gone so south. Well, it did go south for me once. So I did the loop and got knocked out and broke my pelvis. So it did happen.
The damn loop, man.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
It's the Smithsonian. Send it.
What about the 900, Tony? Like how I feel like we can't not ask about that. Like that was such an iconic moment. Like how did you prepare and like think about like just going about that? And for context, like people don't know or maybe aren't aware. Like can you just paint the picture of like how monumental of a moment that was landing that trick?
Well, yeah, it was a big deal for me. I think it was more that. So I learned 720s in 1985. And then, of course, the natural progression of that would be what's the next spin is the 900. And so I didn't really have the guts to try that until a few years later. So I think it was maybe 1988 was the first time I ever tried it, or 87. And because it's a whole different thing to when you do a 720, you're really only blind to your landing zone once. when you do a 900, you're blind to your landing zone twice. And that is a huge shift. That's a huge milestone to try to figure out. So first time I tried it, I was totally blind, kind of landed on my back and said, maybe I'll try that some other time down the line. I eventually started actively trying it in the mid 90s. But credit goes to Danny Way. He was the first one to truly spin a 900 and figure out how to get his body back on the wall. And that was in a video in 1989. They showed him like getting really close and then they faded out after he fell. But that showed it was possible. And that was truly the turning point for that trick. And in terms of the skate industry, where it's like, oh, maybe it can be done. And so I started trying it pretty actively in the mid 90s. There were a few other skaters that were trying it. And I got super close in 96. I actually put it down on the wall and rode down to the flat and then fell into the flat bottom and broke my rib. And that was kind of it for me. I was like, I gave it my all. And I fucked around and found out. And then, I just kind of, I would try it once in a while after that, but I could never really commit to it. Cause I was just like, last time I committed to it, I got broke off. And then, when the X Games came around with 99, they had a best trick, and there were best trick events through those years, where it was a sideshow. Like a best trick event was like, we'd have the vert contests. Everyone would be kind of winding down. The crowd would be leaving, and they're like, all right, best trick. And because it's just a bail fest. And so it was never really a big deal. And a lot of people, they like to paint this false narrative that like everything was leading up to this 99 X Games and that everyone's gunning for this. It's not like that. The best trick event was an experiment by ESPN that was like, maybe we'll try it because it seems like people have fun with it at these other events. And I'd skated all the other best trick events. I usually did other tricks. In fact, I had done a Varial 720 in a best trick event prior to that. So for me, that was my best trick. So leading up to the X Games, that was what I had in mind. And there's, like I said, there's all these false narratives, but the way that they picked the people to compete was based on your results at best trick events. So if anyone had placed at a best trick event, they got an invite. So anyone that was trying and bailing at best trick events or trying 900s didn't qualify because they didn't land anything. Right. So that's how that all came to be. But I had no plans to try a 900. I did a Varial 720 early on in the event. And I was like, I don't know where to go from here. There's 10 minutes left. And the announcer on site, Dave Duncan, called me out and was like, let's see one of those 900s.
That's
like,
crazy.
dude, what do you...
Oh, wow.
See, you want to see me bail? Okay. So I dropped in and bailed a couple. But as I started, I was bailing them more for the crowd. It was just kind of like, here's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then somewhere around my third or fourth attempt, I realized like, oh, my spin is consistent and my speed is consistent. And this ramp is faster than anything I've ever tried it on. And if I'm going to try to land it again, I guess it'll be here. Wow. So then I tried to put a few down on the wall. And they're I wasn't really committed to it, but I was getting closer. And then at some point I was like, all right, I'm fully committed to this, and I'm either going to make it or you're going to pull me out in ambulance. Like there was no other end to that night for me. Like I wasn't going to quit because I was tired.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. And at some point the countdown was over. Like the time was up for us being able to skate anymore, or for us to, the competition time was up. So whatever I was doing just was for my own sake. I didn't care. Like that's what skateboarding is to me. Yeah. It's for me. I'm doing it for what it provides to me. So I wasn't thinking that I was still in the event or I was going to win. I was like, I'm getting this. Like I'm finally figuring it out. And so I finally committed to one, fully committed to it. And I fell forward like I did when I got hurt, but I didn't get hurt. And then I thought, okay, how do I shift my weight more to the back seat as I'm landing? And I did that mid spin. So the next one I tried, I shifted my weight to my back and I fell backwards. And that was the moment. Because it was like, all right, I've fallen forward, I've fallen backwards, split the difference.
Wow.
And then I made the next one.
Wow.
And that's how it worked. I mean, and I didn't think that we were still on air. I didn't think that it counted for the event. I just wanted to do it. It had been so long. I mean, it had been like, at that point, 11 years of attempts.
That's wild.
Wow.
So that's why it meant so much to me. And I think that on the broader scale, people who saw that, they saw skateboarding sort of encapsulated.
Yeah.
Because that's what skateboarding is. Skateboarding is just setting your own challenge, trying it for uncomfortably long until you finally get it. Yeah. And there's no accolades for that, but it's what it brings you is what's important. And I think they saw that on display with what I was doing. And any skater that saw it was like, yeah, that's what I go through learning fucking kickflips. Like, you know what I mean? It's not, we all have that same shared experience, but to an outsider, they saw something different because you don't see that in other sports.
Yeah.
You don't see that sort of repetition and obsession on display. I mean, people have it, no question, but there's no way to really show that. So it changed. For me, it was the best out to competing. It was like I was considering not competing anymore that year. And it was like, that was the highest note I could have ended on. So, but it was, like I said, it was in the moment, it was spontaneous. I had no intention of doing that. Contrary to conspiracy theories, I had there was no way I could have planned that.
Yeah.
And then I had to call Neversoft the next morning and say, you guys, I made a 900. We should probably put it in the game. And they're like, we're in the final beta version here. But I do remember the owner, Joel of Neversoft. He's like way ahead of you.
Wow.
Because they watched it happen. Wow. They're like, so we're gonna figure it out.
That's crazy.
Dude, that's wild because so many times you hear about that story and it's like it was all building to that. But the fact it was a public trial and error and that you decided because Danny's long lost uncle decided to challenge you on the announcer
I used to talk to him too.
Double D?
Same last name, yeah. I used to talk to him on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
Like when I used to do the stretching stuff.
Dave's the voice of skateboarding, man. He's been around forever. He's been around since
He's great.
I started.
That's wild. I didn't even know that either.
And he's still doing it. Like he's still, go to an event, you'll still hear his voice.
Wow.
He's a legend.
Yeah.
But it's funny because he reminded me of that recently where he did an interview about it. And I was like, oh yeah, it was Dave.
That's so funny.
That like put me on the spot.
That's amazing.
And I'm so thankful he did.
Yeah, I never knew that story. That's amazing.
You probably would have never done it if you wouldn't have said anything on this.
I probably would have tried. I didn't know where to go. Like I had one trick that was my sort of safety trick for the best trick. It was a Cavallarial 360 varial. So like my board does a 720 and I do a 360 and I made that like second try. And then the varial 720, which is the board does a 900 and I do a 720 was like, okay, I've only made that once in my life. Maybe I can make it in 20 minutes. And then I made that like the next 2 tries later. And so by then I had 10 minutes left and I had nowhere to go.
What do you think the most will be like in the next like 50 years?
Well, I mean, Mitchie did a 1260. So
how many more do you think we got?
I don't know.
Is there a trick that somebody's trying that is like, that's
the 2520?
Well, so Guy Curry from Brazil, he spun the first 1080 on a regular vert ramp. He has been trying kickflip 900s.
That's crazy.
I predict he'll do it.
Wow.
He'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Hey, Tony, that was incrable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. This is it's been wild to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Now I'm the horse.
Yeah. No, honestly though, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.